Hello everyone. This is Largely Punnet, Alfred Yang from Top Tier Tiers. We've joined as always by Tom. Is that
Hello.
all is that all we're calling you?
Yeah.
I don't think we've this. Oh, it's all right. Well, we can go with Tom. And I'm not entirely sure when this podcast is going to be put out because I know we have plans. But hey, wherever you are in the world, good morning, good evening, or good night. I hope you're having a good day, or I hope your day is going to be great. Today, we're going to be talking about a fairly contentious topic that I hope we can try and make a little less contentious, because whenever one of these things crops up, it is uh, it is always a point of controversy, and it's always something that launches discussions. And more recently, it's a lot of it has been surrounded with negativity in some of the circles I run in. So I think it'd be good to at least talk a little bit about what it might be, and maybe some people can take some information away, because I think a lot of us use these things wrong. And we are, of course, talking about tier lists. The title of the video may or may not have twigged you to that. I don't know what the title is going to be. Tom decides all of that. So, tier lists. Recently, we've had community contribution tier lists as part of the what used to be called the competitive Weiss Discord, but is now just the Weiss Schwartz TCG unofficial Discord. We'll probably put a link in the description or something. Kilua, or Kevin, who also does a great series of Japanese blog posts, happens to put up some Google Forms with which interested parties can log into their Google accounts and then submit votes on how good they think decks are to take to a tournament out of 10. 0 being don't take this, 10 being probably the best choice to top or even win with. And that all gets compiled into a list that becomes a neat little infographic, which I hope is on screen now. I'm seeing like a okay, there we are. So this is the neat little infographic we have split into 5 tiers. Now, before we get started, I want to say a few things in regards to the tier list, and Tom can back me up as well
We're
because
gonna flame
sorry.
everybody.
No, we're not going to flame everybody because I think that doing that misses the point of understanding what these tiers are about. So first things first, this tier list specifically, and most tier lists in general, don't just encompass everything. They
Uh,
encompass everything playable. Or at least everything on here is playable to some degree. There's
yeah.
probably something on here that's missing, like from decks that I personally own, 8 Door Konosuba isn't on here, but I'm not going to raise a ruckus about that. I don't think that's worth doing. And some of these decks aren't even fully threshed out or decided, like Adventure Time and Seven Deadly Sins don't have dedicated builds listed here, even when decks like Bang Dream, Hollow Live, and Slime all have multiple specific builds listed. Now, every single deck here is a deck that you could probably take to a tournament and not feel bad about. We haven't specified what sort of tournament it is, whether it's trios, whether it's singles, doesn't really matter. But I think if you brought any of these decks on here, and you know there are other decks as well that aren't included that you could bring and not feel embarrassed about, bring any of those decks and you're in with a chance. Like, this is a card game. Variance is pretty significant. This isn't like, I mean, even in like fighting games, there's rarely any shutout matchups. There's
Ah,
rarely anything that's just they are very rare in this day and age, man. Like,
I don't know
um,
about that
at
one, but
I do know about that one because there's really very rarely any matchups that are so bad that you can't play a character as a solo. And if there are,
mm,
then well, maybe don't play that character, you know?
you're a
When
boomer, so I'll let you off the hook for that one. Definitely
I'm
not
pretty
the case for
sure
modern fighting games. Not even. Look, man, we're in an era where people, when they're actually trying to win, definitely do pick up more than one character. Like
that's not what I mean. I'm saying that matchups in fighting games are rarely so bad that
they
any
are
character
though.
is completely unviable.
They are. That's just the nature of what modern fighting games are right now. I think. Like even in Guilty Gear, like that was like the ultimate game for people to be proud of, like maining one character. But like as it turns out, when people are playing for money, it doesn't matter. You're gonna pick up other characters, and most people have.
Hmm. And I
So
think that that does actually segue into a really good point about tiers, because a lot of people are of the opinion that tiers don't matter and that you can win with anything. Sorry to cut you off, but this is not a Guilty Gear podcast. Uh, and in that regard, you can try to take a deck like ReZero and try to win with it, but you shouldn't really be surprised if you get shut out by a deck like, 8 Standby Slime, something like that, which is just a matchup that a deck like 8 bar ReZero has very little. 8 bar? Door bar. Which one's the one with lower power? I forget. They
what?
both have kind of okay power, right?
Door bar versus wait, what? Door bar.
Book bar.
Book bar versus 8 bar?
Which one has higher power
It
level?
should be
I
8
forget.
bar. It should be 8
8
bar.
bar has the bigger power levels.
Wait.
Whatever.
No, it is
Because
book bar, but like
book
it
bar
is
has the
book
return
bar,
back
but like
character.
8 bar needs to reverse.
Sure.
It's kind of weird. But it also
But there
doesn't.
are it doesn't reach the power levels you want it to reach if a deck like Mushoku Tensei 8 Standby gets a good game, does it?
I think it has enough power pumps. I don't know if the level 1 is the problem with that deck, but I mean,
I
I
think
actually
there's
forget.
a lot of things wrong with that deck later on. But anyway, um, a deck on a tier list like this, like in the one we're looking at right now, every single deck is in with a chance. And you shouldn't feel like good for maining a low tier deck because every single deck here is a very strong deck that will beat the majority of decks not listed on the tier list. So anyway, let's get into talking points as to why tier lists exist, because tier lists change all the time. As soon as a new deck comes out, the tier list will shift fairly significantly. Like for example, the most recent set to come out in English, Fate Grand Order Camelot. I don't think it's going to shake up the meta terribly hard, but I also think it's probably being underrated a little bit on this list. Maybe it doesn't go up a full tier, but it's certainly pretty decent. Now, the other deck that's about to come up, which is Danmachi, uh, is an extremely strong deck against the current, by consensus, best deck in the format, Mushoku Tensei, to the point where I think you could actually consider that a strong losing matchup for Mushoku Tensei. Like, if both players are very good, then Mushoku Tensei loses out very badly. And that's just kind of why a list like this isn't particularly impactful or important, because it's about to be shaken up a lot. The point of these lists is the first one is it's a launching pad for discussion. It gives people a reason to talk about decks. It gives people a reason to debate how decks are placed in the format. And it also gives people things to look at in terms of what sort of decks that other people, perhaps more competitively minded people, are regarding as threats. So, with all these different Hololive builds, I think that if you want to go into a singles tournament and not be surprised, you'd need to know all of these builds in addition to some others as well. You'd need to know not just these Bang Dream builds, but also other ones that have been topping. But these ones are a good starting point. And you would also need to know the differences between all the different slime builds. Now, I don't agree with like a lot of the ordering on this tier list myself, but that's really not the point because it lets us discuss a lot. Um, like for example, a deck whose results in Europe mostly do not reflect its apparent C tier status is Fate. While there is a Fate stay deck listed in B tier, most of the topping variants of Fate aren't actually quite that simple. And that means there's like a B/C tier deck taking a lot of top eights in one region. Meanwhile, you've got decks like 8 Standby Slime, which is apparently an A tier deck, but its results are comparatively quite mediocre from what I remember. I don't remember seeing a huge number of 8 Standby Slime. I mostly remember seeing Pants Door Slimes standing around. And people still haven't come to a consensus on the Ruby decks. That's something which people should really look into because English exclusives are by definition the least explored decks in Weiss. Most English decks are released in Japan, so you can, for the most part, copy the Japanese as homework. They are a very focused community over there. They put a lot of work into their testing, And after a few weeks, you can usually expect them to have developed a good deck for their meta with a good baseline power level and skeleton that you can steal. But when that isn't the case, for example, decks like Love Live Sunshine here mostly have not existed in this high power level of a meta. Fate's Day Night exists here separate to the Japanese version because it hasn't been banhammered. And Ruby, Seven Deadly Sins, and Adventure Time just don't exist in Japan. It gives you another place to look for other decks you might need to look into. And I think that really is an important thing. In addition to that, when you're preparing for a tournament, you kind of want to know what everyone else thinks is good, because then you can have an idea of what you want to prepare for. And while some people don't really want to think so, there is a strong degree of metagaming in every card game. You're not going to shift your winning percentage by more than like 10% or so, but over enough rounds, I'd say that's a pretty big change. Like you guys did that for your Fate deck, specifically angling to beat non-Mushoku decks, right?
Yeah, and 10%'s pretty significant. I mean, for talking like, I mean, I think in any card, I
Well,
think in anything, 10% is a lot, right?
it's definitely a bit more in games that are best of three, but it's still pretty significant. Like card games are all games of little edges. They're not games where like you can swing, well, this isn't true, but most card games and most card game formats are not about swinging matchups to a ludicrously favored degree, because that just does not happen. There's too much variance involved. You have to hedge your bets and actually build decks in a way that tries to address as many of the matchups you expect as possible. So, for example, you look at the list on the screen now. When you go into a tournament, you need to know how to play against 8 standby Mushoku. You need to know what the Choice Store Hololive deck does. You need to know the sort of tricks to play against the Rushia builds of Hololive. And you need to have an idea of what sort of power levels Bang Dream has at level 2, because those are bits of information that, if you know, will actually give you an edge not only in playing, but more importantly in deck building. And it would also inform what sort of decks would actually be worthwhile. This is also the basis of every great rogue deck and rogue deck builder in every card game. They target the meta in a very specific way and demonstrate an understanding based on knowledge of the meta. Now, this is a community tier list, which means it doesn't reflect any single person's uh, view on the metagame. And I guarantee if you asked any single person to rank all the decks, it wouldn't come out like this. Like, it just would not. Everyone's got their own biases, everyone's got their own testing habits, and everyone has different levels of knowledge for every deck. Maybe a few people out there could have an informed opinion on everything, but I also don't think that opinion would match what this list is, this general consensus. And that's kind of a strength of these lists. Community lists show you what the average competitive player is regarding decks as, which is, it's not an exact science, but like it gives you an idea of what sort of decks to expect in the middle Swiss rounds against other people in like the 3-1 bracket or what have you. And of course, really good players vote on these lists as well, so you're going to see their opinions on the high up tiers as well.
I
Now,
feel like,
hmm?
well, I mean, you have to keep in mind the population for this list is not going to be what you see at like a regional or something. I think.
I think that's really important as well.
Like unless you're literally playing in a tournament with a bunch of Discord people, I feel like maybe so like extreme trends you can probably translate to other areas. Like for example, most people do agree that 8 standby Mushoku is the best deck. Most people do think that Choice Door Hololive is the best Hololive deck. But there is a limit to how much you can, extrapolate as to what you'll see in a tournament you're gonna be playing in. So, I guess that goes back to the point about this being like a starting point as opposed to the end all be all. Obviously, I think scouting your area for what decks people think are good is gonna trump like a tier list like this. Uh, so those are just my thoughts
Um,
on metagaming.
and they're good thoughts. You do need to customize your deck to your metagame. If your metagame is literally all 8 standby slime, then you could bring something like Bofuri and feel okay about it, right? Uh, but on that topic, this is this is Weiss. This is not a game with like enormous stakes. People will play what they have for the most part.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something different. uh,
Mm,
I thought you were gonna say something about how. I mean, there are also just some decks that don't care about what they play against as much. Uh,
yeah, a deck
y-
like well, there are some decks like this that on this list even like
yeah,
8 choice Data Life really doesn't give a damn about
sure,
what it's
yeah,
playing about.
or like quintuplets, bar choice
Yeah,
doesn't really
our
care
choice
either.
doesn't count. I think 8 choice slime is just wants to play a lot of climaxes as
That's
well.
true. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there. And so if you're like tier lists matter maybe a little bit less for those decks too, because if you decided that you want to play this deck that just plays the climax and front attacks every turn, you don't necessarily have to care about you know, the ins and outs of playing against 8 standby Mushoku when you're just gonna do the same thing every turn and then play triple Ichika at level 3, you know?
Yeah, well, if you're playing a very aggressive deck that takes the initiative, then the game is mostly won or lost on how good your attacking turns are, rather than any specific intricate interactions between decks.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a strength of decks. A lot of people do like to have some agency. I am not very much in the agency camp. I think if a deck is really strong, then you should just play it, even if it doesn't give you that much control. And
Yep.
look,
And
with that in mind,
you had a
yeah,
thought
go on.
though. I interrupted you with my but you had a thought about you were saying about how Weiss is not the type of game where that
Yeah,
people
so
take
like,
seriously. That people take seriously. Yeah, yeah. People don't take it that seriously.
because I'm not saying people don't take white seriously, because people like competing, people like repping their decks, and the feeling of getting a good metagame read is really great in every game. Doesn't matter what game you play. But the thing is, in Weiss, the stakes are really low. Up until this year, most prizes are just like tickets to a slightly bigger tournament where only like top one or top two get anything meaningful. Otherwise, all you're doing is going for a chill after, well, not even a chill, but like um a, a highly competitive afternoon in wherever nationals is being held.
Uh,
Recently, well, yeah, go on.
yeah, yeah. I just wanted to comment. I'm gonna bring up Guilty Gear again, but
All right,
actually, you should probably finish your thought before I bring up Guilty
all right.
Gear
Before
again.
you launch into Guilty Gear, Um, so there have been some stakes recently because the first place prizes for the trios have been very limited promos that are selling for multiple thousands of dollars at times, which is like it's not nothing. But if you consider what you could be playing instead, like Dota, Hearthstone, Street Fighter, these games have, they're also games, but they also have massive circuits and massive prize pools, which is why they are so much more competitive. And I can let Tom talk about Guilty Gear now.
Oh, sure. I mean, like, it's just I know people might get maybe a little annoyed at the implications of us saying that the game is not that competitive, but like, the truth is, like, player behavior just changes when the stakes are higher. Objectively, like, and Guilty Gear is an interesting example because it's like a lot like Weiss in some ways. Guilty Gear is like a pretty niche anime fighting game franchise for a while, and only just now, where it's getting more like wide mass appeal and more like players that are like new players than it's ever had before. People have to try harder and they have to like change how they play, how they've played for years. Like it's not enough in the Guilty Gear anymore. Like Guilty Gear used to be that game where people were proud of the fact that they could just play one character and have an answer to everything. But as it turns out, like when the stakes are higher and people are just better and you're competing against a wider variety of players, that just doesn't hold up anymore. So even most old heads in that game competitively are playing more than one character because you like the ideal of like the platonic ideal of just mating one character and sticking with them like till death do we part, like it doesn't exist anymore. Like especially if you want to win, you just can't do that. So
But it does exist in Weiss. That is something that people do in Weiss.
that's
There are
true.
people.
That's true, but
There are people at the locals.
I would
Like,
just argue that like Weiss just is not, there yet.
well, there's no stakes. Like, if there was a
Of
massive
course.
circuit
That's
and
what
like the games were,
yeah. The point is just to say that, Weiss is it's
well,
changing, right?
the
It
level,
is definitely
the
changing. Weiss
level.
is definitely changing, right?
Yeah,
More people are
absolutely. The
playing.
level of
We might
competition.
the level of competition might, get significantly higher in the next, couple of years.
I think it is
So
already starting to
it's
look
already
that
starting
way
to
in
change. Yeah,
comparison.
I think so too. Um, Decks are like super cheap, and people are like, it's super easy for people to play the best decks right now. So
Exactly. Like, we're gonna see Quince come out, which is gonna be super over opened if the first booster is anything like it. And 8 Standby Quince is gonna be one of the best decks the game has ever seen. Never mind just in English. It's like really good in Japanese as well. 8 Standby Mushoku is really good as well. Hololive is dirt cheap. Slime is probably dirt cheap. Danmachi may or may not be cheap, I don't know. But all the decks I'm listing are going to be high A or S tier decks on this list, I guarantee it. Not just because of public perception, but they're just so obviously powerful. Seven Deadly Sins is dirt cheap right now. If you get that second booster, it could also be a top tier. Like, it is much easier for people to have a really powerful selection of decks at their disposal now. Whereas before, people did not know what the best deck was, and sometimes when they did know what the best deck was, they couldn't afford it because, well, you look at the prices of cards from like Konosuba and Fate and Love Live
AOT,
Sunshine and
AOT is a huge one too. Like
AOT, yeah.
$50
AOT is,
errands. Anyone else
oh
remember?
god. I remember people like um people would be selling deck shells of every deck, oh sorry, every card in the AOT deck, except the 1-0 Aaron, because the 1-0 Aarons had already been sold, and then just everything else cost basically nothing.
Yeah.
Because yeah, that's just how it was. And
That's
like,
definitely not the case now.
no.
I mean, can I just look up some prices?
Like, take a random budget deck that lots of people will maybe get into game with, like Choice Pants Mushoku Tensei, which is like an upgraded trial deck, yeah? That deck is a very competent deck. A tier, maybe B tier, depending on how down on it
Dude,
you are. Very
Marin level
solid
3
deck.
combo is $8 on TCG Player
What
per
is?
copy. Marin level 3 combo is $8 per copy on TCG Player.
Who's Marine?
Like the level 3 finisher
Oh,
thing.
the whole life. Yeah, Marine. Sure, whatever. I don't actually know how to pronounce her name. Yeah, that card is $8, but how much is the SSP?
Okay, but like, you don't need SP to play the deck.
No, I mean if you don't have the SSP, how do you show your true devotion to
Ah,
the
yes.
what's her name? The captain of the Hosho Pirates Marine. No, and
uh,
in all seriousness, you can play a super strong Hololive deck with just a handful of booster staples, and trial deck cards. Like the Rushia deck is primarily trial deck cards. A lot of the super strong level zeros and Hololive, some of them are like commons. We're entering a point in time where Weiss is one of the most affordable TCGs to play at a high level, and the issues with Weiss as a competitive game are no longer about availability. They used to be, not anymore. So, with that in mind, I also want to say that the tier list that you see here is not the list of decks to choose from. That's That's silly. You can play lots of decks outside of this. I can name a few that you are bound to see at some point if you play a lot of locals. You are bound to see like 8 bar Data Live, Mono Blue Titans,
Oh,
all
I've
sorts of
seen.
Alicization
I
builds.
saw a bunch of Door Pants Seven Deadly Sins at Texas.
That
Actually, it was
that
crazy.
that
There's
deck is
so
apparently
many.
really good.
That deck
I
is a
don't
really
know
good
about it.
beginner deck. And I
I
don't say
don't know how good
this.
it is. Yeah,
And I don't say that to like make fun of people. I just think it's a really nice beginner deck. It's like super straightforward. The level 1 combo is like a check top 4, add 1. Level 3 combo is like a burn 4 that like sometimes mills a climax before the burn. So it's like, those kind of decks, have value. Um,
yeah.
and are
You'll see
definitely
people.
pretty playable. Uh,
Hmm. Like you'll
uh,
see people on decks like Door Standby Camelot, or you'll see people running like mono band Bang Dream decks that are highly competent because
right.
that deck has multiple boosters just pushing it, and you've got like Pants Book Slime because people found out that the book combo in Slime is actually a serviceable top end.
Oh, right.
Oh, wait,
I've.
sorry, that's actually on the list. I didn't even notice it, but it's on the list.
Wait, it is where?
Um, it's in
Uh,
B tier next to 8 choice slime.
oh, it is. Wow.
And like the only Kaguya build on here is Standby Door, which I think that post ban list isn't the best deck anyway. Like you'd want to play something with a more competent level 1 combo. There are lots of decks out there for every single one of the listed series that are brimming with potential
Especially Hololive.
because yes, Hololive is a deck where we have 3 builds here in A and S tier,
There are
and
so
I
many more
promise you,
builds. There are so many more
there are
builds.
so many. Like,
Even like
um,
these like these concepts, like you talk about these concepts like Rushia or like Kanata, there are more ways to run these cards with other like climax combos. Like it's so crazy actually. The kind of
yeah, it's
diversity.
an incredible deck for the game, to be honest. Like, you've got other things like Coco top end. You've got that one insane person from Atlanta running Roboco. There's so many different ways to build these decks that just aren't explored very much. And looking at tier lists is a way to see what is in the public consciousness. And once you've kind of understood all of that, you can start looking outside of that into decks that maybe you're more familiar with. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to bring Aobuda or Excel World and Crush because you have a somewhat decent matchup against 8 Standby Slime, but there are lots of competent decks that probably should be on the same level as D tier. Like, just honestly. Um, and that's most of what I want to say about the tier list. Don't take these things too seriously. Joke about them if you want, but make sure you think about these tier lists to some degree if you want to take the game seriously. Um, I know I said we weren't actually going to do this, but what do you think of this tier list in regards to the English meta?
What do I think about this tier list? A lot of 1K1 decks, a lot of global soul decks. People regard very
Or
highly at the moment.
are there any 8 standby decks that are worth playing over Mushoku?
Mm,
Ruby maybe?
I
That's
think
about it, right?
Ruby.
Because I wouldn't take
Uh,
Slime. Like I definitely wouldn't take Slime over Mushoku.
I think Slime's a little high. Actually, I would.
I would exactly reverse the order of Slime decks on this
Yeah,
list. I would
yeah.
ignoring Pants Book, because I don't know about that deck, but I would like put 8 choice above Pants Store. I would put Pants Store above 8 Standby. Like 8 Standby Slime should be like in mid B tier, maybe. It's still super viable. It still crushes beginners, but it is not as good as the decks around it. And I am not the biggest proponent of Choice Pants Mushoku. I think that deck is much more competitive
Hmm.
than 8 Standby Slime in the hands of a really competent player.
Uh,
Uh,
I
I
don't
think
really
that
have
as
any
far as
particular feelings about this tier list. Actually, I don't know.
as
I th-
far as tier lists, like community tier lists go, this might honestly be one of the better ones. Like a lot of the decks that aren't rated very highly are, as I mentioned earlier, on this list and still highly viable. They just aren't listed as highly by the community because they're seen as old, they're seen as not particularly strong, or they just have bad matchups into things. Like some of this is very easily explainable, right? Like Seven Deadly Sins is C tier. I know very good world's caliber players who think that deck is like top five. Well, maybe not top five, top 10. Um, but it's languishing down in C tier. Like I mentioned earlier, lots of Fate players are still on about the deck. Top 10, probably. I think it's top five, but
1, 2,
like
3, 4, 5, 6.
as I mentioned earlier, tier lists change incredibly frequently, and once Danmachi drops, I think Fate loses a lot of viability because Danmachi just does what Fate does outside of refreshing really competently. And Kaguya is just unexplored as far as I can see. That deck is possibly quite strong still, just not in that configuration.
Maybe he's stuck in a bit of a set 2 waiting room. Honestly,
Quite
um,
possibly, yeah. I think that a lot of these decks are rated approximately right. But some of the undervalued decks all share something in common. They're really underexplored, or they're old, or they're expensive, or a combination of the above.
yeah. I mean, there's a
Like,
lot. There's always a lot of opportunity for creative deck builders to examine card pools of underestimated and underappreciated sets, and then come out with something pretty strong. Like the way that Bofuri list like splat made a big splash in the last
yeah,
BRO, right? Um
I think both Rue should not be on this list for the record. Like, I do not think that deck is something you should take to a tournament.
yeah, sure. But like
But he
or that fate list that ran the coin flip fate list. Was it BRO that it won, or was it like a spring? I forget.
that
Um
deck was it was one of the early trios tournaments. I think that deck
yeah.
was sick. It ran like no Avengers. Like it was pretty sick. I will say that much.
Yeah,
Um,
I there's just um it's all well and good to commit yourself to playing like a super strong recognized deck, but there are advantages to playing decks that people are not prepared for.
yeah,
Um
don't take these lists too seriously. Just if you are someone who champions, um, I don't know, Bard or Seven Deadly Sins, and you've been taking names against all of the whole life players at your locals, you can keep playing that, and you shouldn't feel bad for that. These are
I
all in good fun. Hmm? Go on.
yeah, I just want to say just to finish my thought. I do feel like the most opportunity for like surprising people comes from taking like underestimated newer sets. Like I would not be surprised to see an FGO list do very well in the next like couple of months in Bro maybe. Um
That deck's really strong. It
yeah,
can
yeah.
snowball so
I
easily.
definitely I definitely think it has some amount of viability in the current meta for sure. But there's like plenty of examples even like if you look at the Japanese edition of the game, there are plenty of examples of decks that just kind of came out very quietly and then turned out to be really strong, meta defining.
Yeah. We've
Um
got D-side. Assault Lily was not really valued very highly for a long time, even though it was consistently incredibly powerful. Ilya has just kind of been creeping along in a really strong position, and people don't really take much notice. There's lots of decks like that, even in Japan, where they test way more.
yeah. And
Like no one in Japan rates 8-door Quints very highly, right? Like it's known that it's not
no,
rated very,
it's definitely not really played. No.
but it's such a strong deck.
Um, what are some other example like
Well, Pants, Stock Soul, Alicization was like not a deck on most people's radars until people started doing well with it just before the ban list hit, right?
in Japanese?
In Japanese, yeah.
Right, yeah, they started playing Rikuli.
Yes. Card is insane. But
um
people overlooked it for quite a long time.
let's see.
And well,
Do any final thoughts? I mean, what do you think about this tier list, I guess?
I said like I said earlier, I think it's
Reasonable?
all right. I have been known to make fun of these tier lists to a very scathing degree. Like
Wait, but that's just content, dude. Like that's what these tier lists are for.
some of these lists are not very good. They overrate decks significantly, but that's fine because most people voting on this list still get the top couple right. It's when the top few decks aren't right that you have to be a bit concerned about the list. Here, they've mostly got it right. The top few decks are Mushoku, Bang Dream, and Hololive. I think that is completely reasonable. Everything below that is contentious. That's always the case. That's nothing special here. This list is much better than last quarter's list, which had like Choice Pants. Mushoku is like the third best deck or something ridiculous like that.
Right.
Uh, yep.
Yeah, sure.
So this list is way better than that one. I think it probably is still influenced too much by recency bias, and there are decks that are arbitrarily low because certain cards are impossible to buy and test with, like buying Konosuba cards, buying the 8 standby SAO targets, Sakura Brainstorms for Fate. These cards are all impossibly expensive, and people will rate them lower just because they don't have experience with them.
On that little segue, I will say that if we do get an English exclusive set in the next season, that is probably like uh what I find is that the quality of the community's testing for English exclusive sets is very disappointing. And I don't say that to like be mean, but it was pretty disappointing to see people kind of discount Ruby and Seven Deadly Sins. I think is currently being like like
Super undervalued.
there's definitely bias towards playing decks that were figured out in the Japanese metagame for sure, right? You wouldn't disagree with that?
Oh no, that's how do you disagree with that? It's a very true statement.
Yeah. So like back to like opportunities for creative deck builders, I really feel like English exclusive sets are so criminally underrated and underestimated like throughout the history of the English metagame. So I would really love to see people do well with English exclusive sets because I think it's honestly kind of embarrassing
Hmm.
that we don't see English exclusive sets do better because I
Yeah,
feel like
like
they should be able to, but they're not.
look at Adventure Time and Seven Deadly Sins on this list are so untested that there's not even a consensus climax lineup for a single entry on each
Yeah,
list.
yeah, yeah. There's that. Was that the X means? Oh man, that's pretty. That's
Like
isn't that embarrassing? I feel like I would be embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for like
we
imagine Japanese people looking at these resources like, and I'd imagine they'd be interested in like our English exclusive lists, right? Because it's a object of
yeah, they don't
curiosity.
have those decks, right?
Yeah, they don't have those decks. It's like probably pretty interesting, but like you look at this and it's like, there's no there's no community, there's no like agreed upon deck for Adventure Time or Seven Deadly Sins. Like if I were
We don't
looking at
use like
these, I would just think that people aren't trying hard enough. If I were like,
we know that the Meliodas and the Jake and Finn finisher are what we want to play towards. We already know that. We knew that as soon as the spoilers dropped. it was obvious that these were extremely powerful. And yet, even with that goal in mind, people haven't tested these decks enough to know what is best. And it's not like we don't know the options. We've seen standby choice adventure time topping. We've seen 8 choice topping. We've seen door choice topping. 7 deadly sins, almost no one gave it the time of day. It gets more traffic online for its ridiculous SP PSA prices than it does for its competitive viability, which, like Tom said, a
Dude,
little bit
Meliodas
disappointing.
is $2.50. Maybe I should build this deck.
That card isn't a double R for the record. It's like a.
It is a double R.
It is? Oh shit!
Yes,
No,
it's a
it
double
doesn't come.
R.
It doesn't come in foil. That's right.
It's dude, this deck is so cheap. All right, you know what? Oh my
It's a
god,
good investment if you
it's
bought it now. It's a good
crazy.
investment.
It's so crazy. Oh my god. Uh, but yeah, I mean, that's just. I guess that's like the if. I guess that's like what I wanted to leave,
Convey.
convey, leave like as like a final message. Um,
You all got a test. Who knows? Ruby might actually be tier 0, and none of you know it because you're all late in testing.
yeah.
And I say you're, including me, but like I literally like
I mean,
in
uh,
2 days time, my quote unquote local Springfest is happening. I couldn't get time off for it. So
that's
like,
unfortunate. Wow, you're not
well,
trying hard enough, clearly.
I arguably could have gotten time off for it, but like between that one and Pokemon Regionals, I made my choice.
Dude,
So
imagine not putting Weiss ahead of your career. Imagine.
mm, um, well, like I said, I could have chosen it over Pokemon, but I chose Pokemon.
Dude, okay, I think I'm gonna buy I'm gonna buy some Seven Deadly Sins cards, I think. These cards are way too
Right.
cheap. It's crazy.
The deck is way better than people think it is. All right, so I think we'll start to wrap up there. Slightly shorter cast this time around, but um, think about what tier lists mean. Don't just look at them and think, "Oh, well, they're already S tier sets. I guess I better play one of those." There's a lot to the game that is unexplored because this game is such a how would you put it? Like it's unexplored territory. Right now, the very best players, and I can name names if I wanted to. I'm not going to, but like the very best players are not just using the top
Holy.
tier Japanese sets. You've got people who are running completely out of left field climax builds. You've got people who are running decks like Bang Dream, Hololive, even Mushoku Tensei. They're running builds that are so unique that they get named after these people. That shouldn't be the case.
Dude, who are these
Everyone has
people rating? Who are these people giving Sunshine 4s and 3s, man? This is so cap.
they're like the
Like,
anti-Australians.
hello?
The
Like, come
anti-Australians.
on. Come on. You cannot. Okay, maybe they just. Okay, maybe these people just rate all decks kind of low. If that's the case, then okay, that's kind of the case.
Full disclosure for everyone listening. Tom here is a Sunshine simp. He has the deck maxed, so you can feel free to
No,
disregard his
that's
opinion on
not
Sunshine.
true. That's not true. I had it maxed
What?
in Japanese, and then it got banned. And I was really sad.
All right,
Um,
Sunshine simp,
you know.
just calm
Oh,
down
by the
there.
way, this spreadsheet is available to the public too, so you can just. I think, in addition to looking at like the image itself, looking at what people rate these decks, like looking at the range of responses, it also can be quite interesting. Um, as you can, because like the way they're ordered on the image is like based on averages, but like of course, um, there can be more information to be gleaned from looking at the way people have voted about the deck. Um, because it's even though like let's say for example, Sunshine is averaged average 7. Not everybody, rated this deck a 7, as you can clearly see. Some people gave it a 10. Some people gave it as low as a 3.
Who gave it?
Uh,
Who gave it a 10? I wanna know what else that guy rated a 10.
I mean, let's just look at the 10, 10 to Sunshine, 10 to 10 to Mushoku. That makes sense, right? Wait, those are the only decks they voted
I
on.
mean,
Decks they voted on.
those are literally the only.
They're from
Where
Asia.
are they? Where?
Uh, I'm not okay. I'm not laughing at this person. Okay, it's just so. It's like they literally just showed up to this poll to vote on these two decks.
And that gives you a kind of
Oh my
idea as
god.
to the quality of data that is contributing to the tier lists. And
By the way, I mean,
it-
just a slightly serious segue. It does make sense if you rate Sunshine if you rate like Sunshine highly, that you'd probably also rate Mushoku highly. And that's pure like
Sunshine
a
is good against
yeah.
Mushoku. Yeah,
It's like purely a matchup thing. But it also would make sense to rate Mushoku highly but Sunshine low. Simply because you can think that Sunshine has a great matchup against Mushoku, but maybe not against the field. That I guess. But I do believe it would be very weird if I saw someone rate Sunshine very highly but Mushoku low. I think that should not happen, right?
that's very strange.
That would be
Yeah,
very odd. So, and I don't think there's anything like that in these responses. They're like mostly
they're mostly consistent
mostly pretty
with
high.
that sort of
But
opinion. Yeah,
like if you saw someone rate Sunshine like 10 and then Mushoku like a 3, then there's something something weird. But yeah, I mean stuff like that.
Shenanigans.
Stuff like that is like you can definitely get some interesting insight into what people are thinking. Just I laughed at this guy or girl but like it's interesting information. So
They're, they're from Asia. I wonder which actual part of Asia they're from, and because Australia is not an option, is it?
no, it's you'd be under Oceania, which there are
Oh,
4
so
people that
yeah.
responded from Oceania.
Oh,
Assuming
really?
people, didn't lie about where they're from. That's all. That could also have happened, by the way.
Understand.
Uh, but yeah, I
This
mean,
is
so
another.
oh,
This is another thing to look at when you look at community tier lists. If you can find a breakdown, then you can evaluate the actual data. It's like the basics of evaluating evidence, evaluating science, looking at the raw data that's presented to you. I think is did someone give Data Live choice standby a 10? Gee,
is this choice standby? Yeah, it is a 10. Hey man,
10.
who could this be? Oh, they're from Asia too, actually. Yeah, I would have said
That guy gave
I would have
a
said
lot of sense.
Riaz, but he's not from
No,
Asia. So.
no. Riaz is an 8 choice slime stand now, dude.
A choice slime, that makes sense.
He's been on 8 choice slime since like the old days, the beginning.
And on top of that, there's also a wonderful page, maintained by Taya at Wise Tea Time. She's gone through a lot of effort to maintain like this list of wait, why can't I? Oh, sorry.
Hololive is impressively high given it released midway through, right?
Exactly. That's interesting, right? There's like she's like percentage for this Springfest. She did all the stats for this. She got painstakingly, I might add, got all these lists from people from every single Bushiroad Springfest event.
Crazy.
I think every almost all of the top 8 lists are here, which is really crazy. It's like an unprecedented amount of like information that we're getting. This was not always the case. Not always the case. I can tell you that. So much information, valuable information here. That you should kind of supplement the picture tier list with, I think.
Yeah,
as you prepare for BRO and BCS this fall.
The
Links,
tournaments
I
are
think,
upcoming.
Yeah.
I don't know what pricing looks like. What is the pricing like?
I have no clue. They haven't They haven't
Yeah.
said anything. Um.
Unfortunate.
mm, Okay. I guess. I guess that's it then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, we can probably call it there. I think it's there's only so much you can talk about with one tier list. We could have talked about the Japanese one, but
Oh God, we would have been
I
here
think
forever, man.
that's a like it dissecting the mostly Western and Western affiliated countries' viewpoint on the metagame of an incredibly isolated nation that really isn't played very seriously outside of that same island nation is like
Wow,
that's the sort
that's
of thing you could turn into a journal article. That's not the sort of thing you do in like a 40-minute podcast
it's also
shooting the
just too
shit.
hard, and it's also way too easy to disagree with like everything people say about anything in
Yep.
like a discussion about the JP meta. So it's like, um,
Not much you
cause
can
like,
do about that, folks.
oh, cause all the people that would be talking, like, we don't even play there. That's like the thing. That's the crazy thing, right? So like,
Hmm.
how qualified can we really be to talk about, like those tournaments, those events? So,
Pretty much.
all right. So I guess that should be the end of this
We will
episode. I
probably
don't know if
we'll call it there. It's a bit of an impromptu episode. But we'll I mean, I always look at the tier list day of like the release of the tier list as like a day of uh I get prepared to roll my eyes because there's always
wow.
something incredibly
Wow.
incredibly there's always something there. It's what happens in competitive communities that don't have as much at stake, that are relatively immature, so to speak. But that's just what it is with every sort of community's tier list. Like if you ever looked at a an event hub's tier list or
Oh
a
god.
Smash Boards competitive tier
All right.
list,
I mean, those
or
lists just have no value. So,
that's the thing. I think at least our lists are compiled from people who have more than just a passing interest in the game. And I think the majority of it is usable data, like we've spent the last 40-ish minutes discussing. And I think that it would be very wrong to just ignore it completely. But as every competitive player probably does, probably well, every competitive player probably responds in a similar way. There are definitely disagreements to be had in regards to this tier list because, of course, you're going to disagree with some amount of the community's opinions. That's just how it is. But don't worry about it. Don't lose sleep. In another 3 months, there'll be another tier list, another bunch of upheavals, and the tier list shouldn't dictate what you play anyway. So when you're preparing for your next big event, I hope you take it into account at least, because if nothing else, it gives you kind of an idea of what the community at large thinks about decks and what you should be preparing to face in Swiss rounds at least. And just do what you think is best to deal with your local metagame, taking into account as much data as possible. And these tier lists are very useful data. That being said, I think I like the Wise Tea Time post better, but everything has value, you know?
yep.
All right. That's us signing off. Whatever you're listening to us on, thank you. Leave us a comment, drop us a whatever you want to do. You can find us on the Discords. You can comment on the YouTube videos. I don't actually know what's is it Spotify or is it what else have you got us on?
I have us on Spotify. Yeah.
I do not know what Spotify has in terms of comments, but whatever.
I don't think they
Let
do.
us know. That's fine as well. Let us know what sort of things you think would be useful to for us to look at, because it's it's interesting looking at this sort of data and dissecting it, trying to turn it into something that everyone can use.
Yep. All right. See you guys next time.